Why do countries torn by civil war rarely emerge as robust democracies with sustainable peace? Why? On the one hand, everyone wants peace. Importantly, the democratic peace theory that observes an absence of war between democracies seems to be indeed, and arguably, as close as anything we have as an empirical law in international relations. On the other hand, since the end of the Cold War, the New World Order has included the spread of democracies and an explosion of conflict, from genocide in Rwanda and Darfur to civil wars in the DRC, Cambodia, and Timor-Leste. But if democracy is good for peace, why are we not living in conflict-free times? Why? Despite an unprecedented number of UN intervention operations to enforce peace and build democracy, rarely can war-torn countries make transition to both peace and democracy. Either they are trapped in an endless cycle of conflict, or they achieve stability only through a non-democratic rule. We have recently reached an unprecedented humanitarian crisis: 100 million refugees. The past 2 decades have shown an exponential increase in the number of civil conflict and authoritarian regimes, as well as a decrease in the levels of democracy and of peace and security in consolidated democracies. Only 20% of the world's population lives in free countries. That means that 8 in 10 people live in not free or partially free states, according to the Freedom House. Put into perspective, this book concerns at least 1.5 billion people who live in countries of fragility and conflict. The political transition to civil democratic peace is often conflict-ridden. So contrary to the common belief that peace and democracy go hand in hand after civil war, this book explores how they are at crossroads in constant tension. There is twice the number of autocracies than democracy in the world right now, while authoritarian regimes have also become even more violent. Beyond the COVID-19 pandemic, an epidemic of coup seems to have taken the stage in the international arena. In 2021, the number of coup attempts and violent demonstrations matched the highest point in the 21st century, accelerating cycles of violence in countries wrecked by conflict, such as Sudan or Burkina Faso. The scope of this book is all about the paradoxes between civil wars, democracy, peacekeeping, and the United Nations. It might be that although to build peaceful and democratic states seems to be an ideal formula to end civil wars, reality might show that in fragile states, not all good things come together, and certainly not at the same time. In a globalized world, the fight for democracy cliché, or shifting bullets for ballots, can also be lethal and a tool to legitimize abuse of power or instigate potentially violent communities. Moreover, the transitional phase is inherently tumultuous. It can exacerbate social tensions, challenge elite power, and undermine the prospects of stability in the politically fragile conditions that are typically found in countries emerging from civil wars.
So first, what are the main dilemmas in seeking to mutually achieve peace, democracy, and a functioning state? Contrary to the common belief that peace and democracy go hand in hand after civil war, it is arguable that they are in fact at crossroads in constant tension. The literature on peacekeeping, democracy building, and state building already identify few dilemmas. This book advances by identifying additional dilemmas and proposing a dynamic platform of 14 dilemmas in democratic peace building with respective trade-offs. This is the Philosophical, Actors, and Tactical PHE platform. Based on an analysis of more than 40 countries between 1989 and 2022 and more than 60 UN peace operations, the book critically analyzed 12 commonly issues that needs to be addressed in any situations of that kind: elections and political parties, the constitution, check and balances, power sharing, transitional justice, human rights, amnesty, truth commissions and war crime tribunals, DDR, disarmament, demobilization and reintegration, as well as media reform and civil society.
Solving one of these dilemmas leads to others that shapes a complex apparatus of restoring peace and installing a new democratic political regime. Second, what role do United Nations operations play in bringing simultaneously peace and democracy to post-Civil War countries? So by comparing Civil War cases with United Nations intervention and without it, it's possible to explain why UN missions sometimes bring some peace, but rarely a functional democracy to Civil War-torn countries, or vice versa. It is actually more accurate to claim that often a moderate level of each is achieved. When a civil war ends, what do we put in place? How can we bring political stability or democratization out of chaos? We know that in a perfect world, we want to build democracy and peace. The issue is that looking closer into civil conflict, inevitably, those two forces will meet at crossroads. Thus, difficult choices must be made between peace and not so democratically, or democratically, but a resurge into violence like South Sudan. The transition period is where those dilemmas reside the most, and therefore is the most peril. This is not about white doves and rainbows as the idealistic view of peace. This is not just about humanitarian aid or financial assistance for others' problems. This book does not pretend to have discovered a miracle alchemy. Nonetheless, by pulling together the strands of various theories, practices, and case analysis, the book discloses interesting insights into the contradictions of building peace, democracy, and a strong state as simultaneous goals in the aftermath of civil war. Although not a cure for all, the book seeks to provide an answer to these questions. Neither democracy nor peace-building is panacea. Importantly, peace-building and post-war democratization are simultaneous tasks dependent on the direct influence of the elites. This understanding helps to shed light on why peace-building missions often bring some peace, but rarely democracy to war-torn countries. After civil war, law enforcement institutions must be developed concurrently, such as the creation of an effective police force and a criminal justice system. Similarly, political institutions, a non-political judiciary, and electoral commission must also be established. Without these institutions, democracy will fail, as the promise to obtain security for citizens or political rights for the warring factions will be only fallacies. From war to peace, how to bring political stability and democratization is not an obvious exercise. Undoubtedly, it requires an alignment of interest and factors to avoid falling into the trap of electoral authoritarian regimes without conflict resolution. The transition from the rule of the gun to the rule of law is not an obvious exercise, but is nevertheless critical. And this is precisely the essential aim of this book, to assist with an integrated approach when peace and democracy are at crossroads. Hopefully, it can also contribute to making peacekeeping a more robust, more effective, and comparatively more cost-efficient conflict resolution tool for current conflict and avoiding failed transition and fragile states.